So look, Bono's on here on Joe Rogan, and I don't actually really follow Bono at all, really. I like his music. I mean, I used to listen to his music all the time. There was a bit of a period leading up to the election of Trump where Bono was like apparently, like really pro sort of pro Biden, and there's two sides in Ireland. They've got this kind of traditionalist side, and then they've got this side that is kind of like more on the Joe Biden sort of progressive side, kind of wokeness. And I think Bono had identified with the sort of woke side, but now it's there are loads of stories coming out that the whole Trump and Elon Musk thing, ultimately it's going to be a big rug pull, and no matter who you vote for, it's always going to be surveillance state, and it's always going to be digital ID, like the whole Tony Blair kind of plan, the whole Tony Blair World Economic plan. You're going to get it whether you like it or not, because ultimately it's what all these technocrats are going to move towards, right? I mean, even the BBC, when they're doing the Doctor Who programme, right, they've got rebels versus sort of like almost like an empire, but it's still all moving towards everything, robots, automation, digital. It no matter how you portray it, whether it's, empires or rebels, or whether it's a freedom motif versus slavery motif, it's always been pushed under this kind of like, technology, because the imagination, a lot of these film producers and people are all bewildered with the ideas and technology and fantasy side of it. Anyway, I think the fantasy side of it all is completely and totally embedded in it now. Unfortunately, as long as we've got movies which glorify heroes who are trying to save us from bad guys, it captivates people, and they go to watch it and are entertained by it. But they're showing they're entertaining us and getting us to like and watch all the things that they actually do not want us to do, and do not want us to. And when Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil and all these people actually stand up to who they believe are the bad guys, then the government don't like it and say it's bad. Yet they fed, years and years and years and years of movies to us about, heroes taking on big corporations, like in The Running Man, for example, right? Like in the Running Man film, and they got masses of people to go to the cinema and watch that. Even police chiefs would go and take the kids to watch it, right? And now what all the movies have seemed to... I don't watch them anymore, but, you can't get away from watching the advertisements of them, and seeing clips of them. You can't escape it, really. They've turned the family into the superhero now. And even, I suppose, cartoons like Dexter's Laboratory, which I used to like and watch, they've got all these superhero families, and the superhero families have got superpowers, and they're all against some bad guy who's going to spoil it all and shut it all down. And I think now it's going that they're going to be framing whoever wants to stop this Tony Blair agenda as the bad guys, right? Or like, bad people. Even though, they're the protesters, or whether they're normal people, or whoever they are, right? And it's the superhero. It's sort of like the Jeremy Vine morning TV show Super Family, right? They're Superman. Jeremy Vine's like Superman, right? And then you've got Loose Women, right? And the morning TV presenters. So it's kind of in a way a little bit like, I mean, they had it with Banana Man. When they had Banana Man, they had the BBC sort of style news reporter on the TV, right? But now the problem is you've got a split with journalists. You've got the journalists who are sort of kind of like calling out the government, who are against all this sort of like, China social point system. And then you've got like the mainstream who are kind of like all for it. And I think that they're trying to portray the mainstream who are all for it, kind of like the superheroes, almost like Caroline Levitt, is one of these type of characters, you know, almost like on a movie now, part of this super people, basically, and the super people are the good people who always have the good, you know, the COVID jabs and do what the government says, and they're going to have superpowers and be the super people, and people who don't are going to be locked down or not allowed on social media and so forth. So that's generally where they're going with it. Now, when we get onto Bono, you know, what side is Bono on with all this? Well, on this program here, Bono is talking about aid, right? And he's talking about, you know, the conflict in the Middle East, right, which has been literally going on forever, right? Bono's talking about food, and food being stored in places like warehouses and going off and rotting and all these type of things, you know. So it's kind of like on the similar sort of subject to food banks, but it's all to do with aid, relief for other countries, and supposedly anti-war, right? Now, there's only one reason why I'm actually recording this video and making this talk now, and that is because, like, the problem with George Galloway. And the problem with George Galloway is that, you know, when he was in front of the American Senate, you know, on answering to charges, it was because of the United Nations, right? And it was Middle East conflict back then. Now, in the Middle East conflict, which was back then, we haven't really got anywhere since then, have we, really? We're just doing more Middle East conflict, but different names and different groups, right? The government didn't want this section of the Middle East, right, to be able to trade and buy weapons and do things, right? So the government's put these sanctions on this Middle East area, right? And what they did is they said that, right, we still want your oil, right? They wanted their oil, but they weren't going to just give them money for the oil, because they wanted to stop them spending the money on certain things like weapons and all that kind of stuff, right? So they set up this special scheme where it's called an escrow, right? An escrow scheme, right? Where the Middle East would basically put credit into this scheme of oil, right? So they'd send their barrels of oil, right? And it got logged and registered in this scheme, right? And then in return for that oil, they got sent food and you know, aid, you know, medical supplies and things like that, right? So effectively, the governments of the world basically had said, okay, then we're not going to allow you to trade with the world, but we want your oil. Basically, give us your oil and we'll give you relief. Effectively, that's what it is. I mean, there's not really any other way of looking at it from as far as I'm concerned. They effectively locked down the Middle East. It was like a Middle East lockdown, right? Almost like a Middle East lockdown, and they said, right, well, you know, your oil's good, we want your oil, but we don't really have a global political opinion, and, you know, we don't want you doing things we don't want you to do, but even though we're blowing the hell out of you, and, you know, the entire world from, you know, America to Australia to Canada to Russia, to China and everywhere else on the planet, you know, is armed and got military forces, you know, we're going to keep you alive by giving you a drip feed of, you know, relief and aid, right? So it effectively, it was a scam, right? And what they were saying now is they were saying apparently a lot of that food wasn't very good quality anyway. It wasn't very good quality food. And, you know, it wasn't really that much use to them, and yet, but they still wanted to get all the oil off them. So in a way, they kind of got ripped off. Now, the reason George Galloway was in front of that Senate was apparently, you know, he took some personal profit or money out of it when he was meant to be helping, you know, supporting the charity and so forth. But apparently the whole thing was a scam because, you know, it effectively was basically just trying to get the oil out of them and palming them off with rubbish products and stuff like that. So Now, that's why I've decided to say something about this Bono video, because Bono is all about relief and aid and peace, right? World peace, in the Middle East. And a lot of the musicians are into that now, right? And a lot of them give money and out of their, music industry profits and investments and everything like that, supposedly to sort the war out. But they haven't sorted it out, have they? I mean, you would have thought, and back then, remember that now you've got, Bono's on Joe Rogan, right? So Bono now that social media has made more people famous and more people who are not necessarily morning TV people famous, right? You've got Jimmy Dore, Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, the list goes on, Grey Zone. It's unfair to pick any one particular. Paul Thorpe, right? People have got a little bit of an audience now. Nothing like, the TV held these entire nations of audience. But now you see Bono's not just, he's not just on morning TV with Elton John now, doing his BBC interview or ITV morning breakfast show interview saying, we need to give some aid to the Middle East and do this and that. Notice that Bono now, he's on Joe Rogan, or he's on Russell Brand or whatever he's on, right? He's in these minority or opposing view stations which aren't running with him in narrative. Now, the thing is, if Bono and, Roger Waters and the other array of multi-millionaire musical celebrities, if they actually really, I'm not saying that they haven't saved loads of lives and, helped people at all, but they haven't, it didn't work. They didn't, fix things. They've been really doing this, all through the 1980s and 90s, and so forth. They've had an interest in it for quite a long time. Now, how come they haven't, how come there are no more wars in the Middle East? It seems to me they're just doing the same thing. It's like more of the same, right? And it hasn't solved the problem from my point of view. And now Bono's saying, the food's going to waste and so forth. But apparently it was never doing that good in the first place. Apparently it was never that much of a help in the first place. And I think that escrow scheme with the oil barrel was just a scam. Government scam. Like, we'll make out and pretend that we're helping these countries, but we're going to fleece them, we're going to rinse them for all they've got. And they actually did end up palming them off with some rubbish stuff, right? So, I don't know why Bono is on that side of, this morning TV, let's save the world, Jeremy Vine hasn't saved the world, loose women haven't saved the world, calendar news presenters haven't saved the world, the BBC hasn't saved the world. All they do is tell a story, getting in the thick of the action, running around, with bombs going off, telling stories, reporting on it, and basically telling us the story so they can keep the money flowing into it, right? It does seem like forever wars to me, and this is the thing. So, and there are other things which these celebrities could really help out with, and but the top of Bono's priority is these wars and the relief and the aid and saving the people, right? But there are really serious, important issues going on in this country, which these people could, with the click of their fingers, right, sort these things out in 10 seconds if they wanted to, but they don't care, right? Like with the newspapers, right? Like the newspapers are charging us VAT on small political adverts from bodies when we don't have to pay it, right? And also pricing is out of there. You could have a lot more people could be putting their own adverts in the newspapers, to help out in the Middle East, or get petitions signed to get the government to stop doing it, but no one can afford it. Instead, send your money to Bono, and then, Bono's, big, escrow scheme or whatever is going to sort it out. Again, it's always like, donate money to these particular causes and we'll sort it out, when actually what's going on is fraud. those newspapers were calling out all the House of Lords on the fraud scheme, right? On expenses scandals. But the newspapers are doing an expenses scandal themselves. The newspapers are doing a big tax scam. Jim Harris just gone from the HM Revenue and Customs. And then, things like National Archives getting information to study and research and learn things, right? You've got to travel there. And then I don't even know whether that's in the congestion charge zone or whether it's in the ULEZ zone or not now in the National Archives. And they've put all the price of fuel up. No one can get to National Archives. So I'm like, oh, can I have remote access? I'm also ill, right? I've got doctor's cover. Can I have remote access to do some searches? And they're like, oh, no, it doesn't cover for that. Well, I'm like, what am I paying my taxes for, right? This is a massive, huge research facility that we're paying taxes for, right? And you can't even, they're saying that it's all diversity and inclusion, diversity and inclusion, but it's not. National Archives aren't doing diversity and inclusion at all whatsoever, but taxpayers paying for it, And then, there's the issue of the election, how these politicians are getting elected in the first place. Nigel Farage comes along and he says that, he's going to fix everything and get Labour out and, stop all this nonsense, wokeness, right? But in order to do that, he's had to break the election rules and law and cheat, right? And what's the point in having a load of corrupt politicians replaced by new ones with a new corrupt regime, right? Independent candidates, independent people standing for election are not getting elected, right? They're not getting voted in, and it's not a fair competition. And now that all this social media is taking over, there are a lot of other influencers, and like Joe Rogan, you see, Bono is not on Jeremy Vine now, and he's not on the main BBC or ITV, right? He's on Joe Rogan, okay? And that shows that these independent or alternative viewpoints and channels and programs now have a platform, and that is somewhat disrupting the main political parties, and they must have control over these platforms. They've already removed a lot of political material that is constitutionally protected. They removed that illegally. It's a contempt offence, and the government are just turning a blind eye. They're not doing anything about it. YouTube have committed contempts. The Americans got a grip on that under Bill Clinton's government. How can you oppose fairly? But they're calling it Good Samaritan. Bono's meant to be a Good Samaritan doing this aid stuff, right? But, Good Samaritans don't take away constitutionally protected things when you've got a fair contest, to get things put through government, right? Or else otherwise you ain't got a fair contest to put things through government. So the algorithms must be controlled. It's questionable whether or not Joe Rogan, he's been checked that, Joe Rogan is not going to say anything that's going to be too controversial or disrupt the main parties too much. So we'll let him have, 11 million followers or whatever, or 11 million viewers, because he's a safe bet, right? Like Russell Brand. But then Russell Brand started, saying things like, don't pay UK on, don't pay taxes. And then the next thing, the Queen's dead the next day. Whether she really was dead or not, we don't know. But they definitely didn't, something, when Russell Brand, tells people not to pay their taxes and follow that Don't Pay UK campaign, that was probably that's the greatest thing that Russell Brand, I think, has ever done in terms of, campaigning, trying to get people to follow a campaign group. He's done it one or two times, asked people to sign petitions, but a lot less now. And then he got punished for it because Lucy Fraser wrote to YouTube and told them to demonetize him, right? And then they brought all these charges against him. But, Russell Brand shouldn't really... he should be monetized. He could have easily got a lawyer to sort that out. And he's also trying to encourage people not to go on YouTube when he could easily just instead challenge YouTube legally that, that their policy is illegal. It's constitutionally illegal. In England, it is, because we don't have that section, whatever it is, the Section 230. We don't have this Section 230 in England. It's not law in England. It's not English law, right? So, YouTube are breaking the law in England. Politicians aren't doing anything about it. Why isn't Bono doing something about that? You would have thought Bono would be at least promoting a fair platform, because he has to go on the platform, right? If Joe Rogan's channel got taken down, Bono couldn't be on there, right? If Russell Brand got taken down, Bono wouldn't be able to be on there, and he'd be back on mainstream TV only. He'd just be back on Loose Women, or back on Jeremy Vine, or back on, calendar TV morning show doing his, aid and relief and anti-war stuff like he's been doing for the last 20, 30 years, when it hasn't stopped it, right? So, Bono could go on TV or go on the platform and say, look, this policy has to be illegal. We don't have Section 230 in England or Ireland. It's illegal. You can't take a political channel down, right? That would be helping people out. He could even get Russell Brand's monetization back, and Russell Brand might thank Bono and, give him some donations or something, right? But, this is a thing. These celebrities are not actually really helping the very important things that we need to get sorted out now, and they could do it in a click of the fingers. You see, when the MPs got done for expenses and the newspaper investigated it, they had to put the story out first and get some public concern, right? They didn't have to do it that way. They could have just prosecuted privately or done something, but they rallied the public. And they use their own newspapers to do it. Now, we can't rally the public because they're charging us illegal VAT on small bodies. So independent voices can't rally things. So it's like, oh, this is our newspaper, right? Not yours. But yet the newspaper's meant to be there for our stories. What happened to you? What happened to this person? What happened to that person? What happened to that person? They want our stories. They want to know what's going on and happening, but they want to, it's not free press anymore. It's kind of like, oh, this is our club, and if you can afford to be in it, right? They don't even have those, they push petitions out of classifieds and only add weddings, funerals, and other things like that, But Bono's probably not bothered about the fact that independent people can't put their independent political causes in the newspaper, because he just wants you to send him the money and then he can get all the credit for it, and just send all the money to Bono, and then, Bono will use it all because Bono's doing the right thing anyway. So why would you need to put political adverts in the newspapers, right? Why do you need independent YouTube channels, But Bono, if Bono's on morning TV, if he's on Jeremy Vine, if Bono's on, Question of Sport or whatever the fuck he's on, right? He doesn't need Joe Rogan. But notice that now, he's on Joe Rogan now, right? So Bono's playing the field a bit now. He's like, well, I will push him my, aid and relief campaign on mainstream TV, but it's still not working, even though I've got, 10 seconds on mainstream TV to say exactly what the hell I want. Here you go. Bono's got his 10 seconds on mainstream TV. Everyone in the whole world's watching. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. Send me some money so we can get relief to the Middle East. Stop the war. Peace. See you later. Like Ringo. Peace, love, bye. He's done his 10-second statement, but it didn't work because we're still doing it now. They're still on with it, whether or not it's, George Galloway's escrow program with 10 barrels of oil or now, right? They were still giving them crap food then, and now Bono's still saying they're giving them crap food now, right? So, and in fact, what I've realised is that that model of corruption, what Bono's talking about now, right? I'm not saying that I'm not against him in this or that he's wrong or anything, right? But he's pointing out that, all this food's going to waste and getting corrupted when it's meant to be helping people, right? That the food wasn't really apparently that good or doing any good under that oil barrel program, right? And if you consider that whole scheme was probably just corrupt, because I mean, even the American government had George Galloway up, whether or not, Galloway is a hero and he was, saving the Middle East and they just wanted to call him out, or whether or not Galloway was, using a lot of the money for himself or whatever. Either way, the scheme itself apparently wasn't. They just wanted to they chose a country, a region, and they said, right, we're looking in, effectively it's like a lockdown, right? But we want your oil's good for us. We want that, but we're not going to let you do what you want because we're only going to control and restrict what you're allowed to do or not do. So almost like China's social point system, right? Now, all that food, apparently, so they claim that they got palmed off with rubbish food and crap food and not very good Aiden products, right? Isn't that really where we've all been ripped off? Like the corporate network, the corporate elite, the whole global system of, KFC, McDonald's, Subway, invest, Vanguard, the whole franchise, right? It's giving us crap food, right? It ended up becoming corrupt and just giving us really unhealthy crap and rubbish food and keeping us all not at the best physical state, right? So in a way, it wasn't just the Middle East who was ripped off under this barrels of oil plan with this escrow scheme under the United Nations project and palmed off with rubbish, crap food and things, just because they wanted the oil out of them. The public have been ripped off generally in society by these big entities who've basically made and give us crap food, but just packaged it as to look and smell nice. And really, they wanted the work out of us. You see, in the Middle East, they wanted the oil off them. It's, okay, we want your oil, but we're going to block you, put sanctions on you, and palm you off with crap stuff, right? But that's what they've done to the world. That's what they've done to the world. If you compare it, what they've done is they said, all right, we want your work, right? Your labour, your work's good, right? We want you to work for us and build stuff, right? But we're going to palm you off with crap and rubbish food stuff and products, make sure we keep you unhealthy, and we're going to put sanctions and lockdowns on you, which is what they did in the pandemic, right? And what they're doing to China. So if you think about it, China itself, they've got all these sushi bars and all these sugar foods and all these donut type really unhealthy foods and so forth. It's not really. It's not paradise, is it? And that's what I think is good evidence that, these regimes, they block and lock, and then they get what they want out of you, and then you end up getting palmed off with something that's a load of rubbish, basically. And that's what they're doing to the world. Palming us off with rubbish foods and locking us down, and getting what they want out of us, but putting effectively sanctions on, which is what YouTube, has got sanctions on. That YouTube's policy sanctions, and you don't vote for it. It's not even the law of the country. And this is what these governments are introducing. All these big corporate entities with all these policies are which is not the law, by the way. It's effectively they're effectively sanctions, And this is what these type of people do. They sanction us, they get what they want out of us, and they palm us off for something that is not really that good, but they get us to believe that it's good, and they get us to think that it's good, just because it's, got sugar plum on the top of it, or they're advertising it on TV, right? When it's not good. And there's a lot of addicts, a lot of these women are addicts and are kind of fooled by it. And I think that's what's happening with the war machine in the Middle East, send aid. Oh, it's a good project. Same for helping Ukraine. It's always disguised as something good, but actually, it's actually not even that good for the country that it's meant to be helping, And even Bono now is complaining about these projects and schemes, and, Bono's even complaining about, all the aid, being put to waste. So he's supporting, all these causes, and now he's saying maybe they could be managed a bit better, maybe they're not being run that good or whatever. So, but that's the country, and that's the world, okay, that's McDonald's. It's not really, people think that it's good for them, but it's not, people thought that barrels for oil thing was good for them, but it wasn't, and this is the thing. And I think the main part of it is the deception that's going on. People are believing what they're being told, but they're being deceived. And this is now why Trump's under a lot of scrutiny, because, they're all talking about, this big rug pull, that they're going to pull the rug out from under them. And, it's all just going to go, deep state China. No matter what Elon Musk claims that he's going to do, he's still just going to end up more or less going deep state China,